read those to him. The world's great criticism of the Catholic Church is that it is stuck in the past and is an enemy of progress. And there are two errors that can be seen when looking at a criticism like this. Anytime there's a criticism, you always have to look to see, all right, where can there be truth to this? And you have the two kind of errors of reaction to a criticism like this. And one is that there are those Catholics that are staunchly, that because of this criticism of, oh, all you care about is the past, you don't care about progress, true progress, etc. There's one reaction, which is, because the world is saying this, we have to even more go all in on holding simply to the past. And the other reaction is to completely embrace progress without limits. Both of these are wrong reactions. And we see this in many people when it comes to just holding on hopelessly and holding on to the past. And of course we see this in the modern church when it comes to reacting by making progress without limits or boundaries. That's why it's such a beautiful feast, St. Pius X. A good time for us to reflect. St. Pius X is sort of like the Abraham Lincoln of the Catholic Church. The Abraham Lincoln might not have started the American Republic, but he certainly gave a reminder to the country of what it was capable of being. And that's sort of what St. Pius X is. I think my own admiration for St. Pius X is twofold. One is that he is fiercely, or was fiercely traditional, and at the same time fearlessly ambitious. And these are the two, you could say, great pillars of his apostolate as Pope. St. Pius X was, as we know, an enemy of modernism and fought against it mercilessly. And I say mercilessly using that word properly because he was feared by the world at large, and he was feared by all those who were enemies of the traditions of the Catholic Church, who were modernists. But at the same time, he was fearlessly ambitious, meaning he didn't just sit on the laurels of what the Catholic Church was. He consistently and constantly throughout his reign looked to see where progress could be made, good and helping progress. How many popes have so changed the Catholic Church as St. Pius X? We very often look at change as being an enemy, and it's not. Good change is a beautiful thing. The Catholic Church has been evolving for the past 2,000 years. And for the most part, for centuries, it was good. Only recently did it become derailed. And when you look at St. Pius X, when he first begins his reign, he's going to really put this standard forward. He's going to kind of put the playbook of what his reign is going to be like. That first encyclical that a pope proclaims or puts forward is going to sort of be the spirit in which he leads the church. And St. Pius X is going to do this. And once again, he will reinforce these two ideas of being fiercely traditionalist and at the same time fearlessly ambitious. If you want to break down A Supremi Apostolatius, which is his first encyclical, it can almost be, there are two directives given to Catholics. One is the condemnation of ignorance, and the other is the promulgation of fearlessness. And we'll look at the first one right now, which is that of ignorance. St. Pius X, in the beginning of his encyclical, is going to make sure that it's very clear that one of the great enemies of the Catholic Church are not the enemies externally, but ignorance among the Catholic community itself. And this is very often the case, right? As traditional Catholics, very often the traditional movement is moved and is sourced by an emotional reaction, right? We love the Latin Mass, but in essence, the Latin Mass has nothing to do with the fight that we're all about, right? It is a consequence of something much deeper that we are fighting. The battle of today is a battle of ideas, right? Not a battle of ceremonies. Ceremonies come from what we believe in. How we believe is how we will worship. Don't change the way that you worship, change the way that you believe. This is the problem in the Novus Ordo Mass, right? In and of itself, right, it is a Mass. The terror of the Novus Ordo Mass is many of the beliefs that it expresses. That's where the true error is. And very often this is kind of not properly understood in traditional Catholicism. We think the fight is all about the Mass. Do not make the fight about the Mass. If you make it about the Mass, then you very easily can be strayed off of the path. It is about ideas. And the problem in the traditional Catholic movement, and the Catholic movement at large, and St. Pius X is going to hammer this, is that there's too much ignorance among Catholics. They don't know their faith. And he's trying to impress upon the Catholics, if you don't understand your faith and have a true knowledge of it, then problems are going to happen. And what happened is a result of us not knowing our faith. And so I think it's a good time for us to really reflect on our lives. How much do we know our faith, one, and how much are we hungry and desirous to know our faith more? Right? The catechism must be the heartbeat of our lives. If every Catholic man and woman in this church does not have a bedside book, a Catholic book of spirituality or theology, that they're not reading every single day, then it's dereliction of duty. And there's no other way to put it. You are literally not doing the duty that God has given you, both as a Catholic man or woman and as a Catholic father or mother. How can you think to be an effective Catholic father or mother and not be reading every single day to learn more about your faith? You sit there, right, and we say how much we love our children and want them to be saints, yet you're doing nothing to really promote that. Because once again, knowledge is going to be the great driver of sanctity. Not emotion, right? It's knowledge. Because from knowledge comes appreciation and ultimately love and dedication. It only comes from knowledge. It doesn't come from anywhere else. It is on an idea. It is the intellect that latches upon an object of desire. And then the will follows. You cannot train a will unless you have first trained and formed an intellect. And the problem with the Catholics of today is they don't know their faith. They have no understanding. When I mean understanding, I don't say, who made you? God made you. A deep understanding. You wonder why. Catholics wonder why we don't love God the way we should. It's because you don't know God the way you should. It's not some magic pill that you come in here, kneel down, and ask our Lord to love you. He'll say, I've given you everything you need to love me. But you have yet to spend 10 minutes of your day with me trying to understand me on a deep level. It is the only way to love God. And so you can sit there and you can hammer away at the monolithic wall of sanctity all you want, but you will never gain an inch until you dig into the theology of the Catholic Church. And it doesn't have to be some exalted reading. There are many books and authors who are able to take the great mystical theology that we have and filter it down to a very basic level. Right? Whether it be a book of Fulton Sheen, whether it be a Frank Sheen, whether it be a book of the Torah of the Summa, right? Whether it be a great monastic author like Don Marmion. These are not books that you can't understand. And even to say, oh, Father, it's too difficult reading, as it should be. It's a Catholic faith. It is a church built upon the idea that there are three persons in one God. Are you expecting it to be easy? Our faith must be understood deeply in order for us to love it deeply. And this is the first great problem. And St. Pius X, once again, hammers and hammers the idea. There is ignorance if you don't know your faith. There's catechism here on Sundays. How many are at catechism on Sundays? What's the excuse for not being at catechism? List them. You're rushed, you don't have time, it's boring. None of those are good excuses to be in church learning about your faith. There are no good excuses. It doesn't exist. Once again, it's not simply, we're not even talking, it's not just a proactive battle when it comes to the knowledge of the faith, but it's also preventative. To build the walls, that fortress around your soul, to keep sin from bombarding and destroying those walls, we need to know our God. Find a good book, right? There are plenty of them. If you don't know one, talk to a priest. Any one of us will be willing to give you a book. but you must have a book. You must have a routine studying of your faith. And I'm talking routine is every day. 10 minutes. 10 minutes every day to read your faith. This encyclical, A Supreme Apostolatus, I challenge every single one of you here to read that within the next week or two. Every day, take a little bit of it. If you're a husband, read it with your wife. Like 5 minutes every night before you go to bed. This encyclical should be the breath and should be the life of Catholic men and women. Because the whole encyclical is about one thing, which is the restoration of all things in Christ. All right, we talk big. Well, we're traditional Catholics, we're not restoring anything. We're holding desperately on to ceremonies and thuribles and incense. That's all it is if we're not desirous and on fire with passion to learn about our God and our Catholic faith. Ignorance is the great enemy of the Catholic Church. Not some spooky modernist with some 21st century philosopher book. It is the ignorance within this very chapel. And the ignorance in all the faithful chapels throughout the world. This is what St. Pius X himself said, and this thought has to be continued on even today. Ignorance. And the second idea of his, right, is this fearlessness. Right? He was fearlessly ambitious. Went about changing the breviary, went about making changes in some of the liturgy, making changes as the famous one, as we know, is moving the Eucharistic age to being young children in first grade, as opposed to being a teenager or even an adult. Right? Huge changes, massive changes. That many of you, if you were faithful back in St. Pius X's time, would be like, well, who is this? How could he change the age? There were his critics. But he wasn't afraid to do what he had to do. That ambition is what we need today in the Catholic faith. Right? St. Pius X is going to say this very same thing. Right? Catholics need to be fearless in the face of the world. And the problem with Catholics is that we're very much afraid. St. Pius X says that one of the reasons why the world has had such effect upon the Catholic Church is because of the timidity and the fearfulness of the Catholic faithful. Nothing else. It's that we are afraid of this world. We're petrified of what it might think. How many of us can't even make the sign of the cross properly in a restaurant because we're afraid of what some goofball might think of us? The sign of the Trinity, almost eternity, sucking itself into that very symbol, and we're afraid to make it. We're afraid. Consistently, I was on the recollection of the high school boys this week, and telling them that consistently, you see, the ones who falter in the faith are the ones who are afraid of the world. The men and the women, especially the young men and women, who aren't afraid but fearlessly go into the world, who understand the world, understand its problems, its evils, but go into the world with ambition and fearlessness, very often do not have any difficulties in sustaining their Catholic faith. We must be ambitious in our faith. And that starts from the very natural level, right? Supernatural builds upon the natural. So you must, if you are going to be supernaturally ambitious, you must be naturally ambitious. And I'm not saying that everybody has to say, I'm going to be the next president of the United States. But in every area in which you are, you have to look, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, what is the goal? And are you doing everything to accomplish it? Fathers and mothers, you should be instilling ambition into every one of your children. It should be how are you going to make most excellent the gifts and the skills that God has given you? This very often emotion in the traditional Catholic movement, which is stay away from the world, stay away from college, stay away from trade schools, because all these things are evil and they can encroach upon your soul. It's ridiculous. You're literally handicapping the soul of your child by not promoting that ambition. Because on a natural level, if they naturally are going in on themselves, then supernaturally they're going to do the same thing. And you're building cowards against the world. Cowards who, because they have no interaction with the world, they have no understanding or comprehension of it. When they go out into it, because one day they will, they're immediately retreating and they immediately fold. Because they're desperately afraid of it. Ambitious on a natural level. Let your household be an atmosphere of ambition. That whatever it is, once again, it could be a simple task, but do it to the best of your ability. Because for God, for the duty of God, for the worship and the glory of God. Douglas Hyde was a communist leader who converted to the Catholic faith. He said the great problem with Catholicism is that there's no ambition. Catholic parents and leaders don't demand anything of their faithful and don't demand anything of their children. He said, when I was a communist at 16 years old, they came in every day and said, you go and conquer the world. And he says, when I became a Catholic, the only thing that was ever asked of me was to arrange the chairs in the parish hall. This is the problem, is that we don't think big enough when it comes to our Catholic church and our Catholic faith. We are here as servants of God. What part are you playing in the restoration of all things in Christ? What is it? What are you actively doing? How, on a spiritual level, firstly, are you trying to become the saint that you were born to be? And then how externally are you manifesting the beauty of the Catholic faith? Because there are men and women out there hungry for the truth. And the problem is we're all hiding in the hills. We're taking our little candle, we're covering it, we're protecting it. But that's not what we're called to do. Tradition is strong. We don't need to sit there and cover it from the wind anymore. It's a fire. Now it's time to go out and spread it to the world. So what are we doing? It could be something as simple as going into your workplace and putting a crucifix there. Something as simple as going against a coworker who blasphemes. Making sure he knows my God will not be insulted in front of me. It could be something as simple that on a Sunday, any given Sunday, you take your family out, and instead of going and doing something for yourself, you get a bunch of miraculous medals, and you go around. Right? You go around to the homeless, you go around to a soup kitchen during the week, right? Or you just go to a neighborhood. Take 25 minutes, knock on their head, I just wanted to give you this. You'd be amazed at the reaction of a soul and a heart and a will by the miraculous medal. So powerful. The amount of conversations that I've had just walking around the city and saying, here, take this miraculous medal, and they wonder what it is. There you go. Speak to them about it. That's the duty that the Catholics have for the Catholic Church. It should be always focused on what can I do to restore all things in Christ. But no, we're going about our day just like nothing, like there's not a war going on. Like there are not people to be converted. What happened to the Catholics of the world? Hiding in the hills. Petrified of what the world might do to us. What can it possibly do? Have the spirit of St. Pius X. Have the spirit of the Archbishop, which is fearless in front of the world. I don't care what the opinions of the world are. I don't care what you might think of me because I come in front of you. It's like college kids, young men of the parish, right? Go out there on a college campus, set up a booth. We're Catholic. What do you want to know about? This is what we're called to do. Each and every single one of us is called on some level to restore all things in Christ. What is it for you? And how will you instill that into your children? This is not poetry. This is not romanticism. This is the duty of every born Catholic. So step up to the plate and do it. Ignorance. Fight against ignorance. Learn your faith. Be driven, hungry and thirsty to know more and more about your faith and your God. And once again, if you're not doing it every day, dereliction of duty. You are failing as a Catholic man or woman, or failing as a Catholic father or husband. And then what are we doing to proactively fight for Christ our King? Fight and fight fiercely for him. Be ambitious. We should have the idea and the notion and the desire of taking over the world. It's not, once again, it's not just poetry, it's not romanticism. It's what the Catholics did. They actually did it. And they started with 12 foolish fishermen. And they literally took over the world. With me you can do all things. Let's not only start believing in that, but let's start acting upon it in our everyday lives. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.